announcement. I know it was on the doors and all that, but we know everyone realizes there's no videotaping. We are going to record it for future release, but we thought in fairness to all the candidates that we would not videotape or live stream or anything like that. So starting off, again, welcome to Trustful. It's a compliment to us that you applied for the job, and we're so happy to have you with us tonight. We're happy. Thank you for everybody in the audience. We're going to start. I think a couple of us introduced ourselves, but we're just going to go down the row and tell you who we are and a little bit about ourselves. I'm Kathy Brown. I've lived in Trustful for a long time, 36 years, and all 5 of my children are Hewitt-Trustful graduates. So it's a nice place to be. So I'm gonna let the rest of my board members do that.
I'm Kim DeShazo. My husband John and I have lived here for, 16 years now. We have a 15-year-old, a 13-year-old, and a 10-year-old, all of which are involved in Trustful City Schools. I've got one at the high school, one at the middle school, and one at the elementary school. So we are fully invested at our house in Trustful City Schools, but we're glad to have you here. Thank you for being here today.
Hi, Mark Sims, 8 years, 3 children, but the youngest one graduated Trustful and is now using all that education at Auburn University. So doing great. So pleasure to meet you.
Hi, my name is Sherry Tolbert. I've been living in Trustful for 17 years. I have 2 children, 2 graduated from Hewitt-Trustful, and it's a pleasure having you here tonight.
I'm Steve Ward. I've lived in Trustful since 2006. My background, and I've had grandchildren went through the school system. My background is in education, all from Georgia. So interesting to see what's going on. Glad to have you.
So we're just going to start. We sent you a list of questions. We sent all the candidates a list of questions, and we're just going to kind of do it a little bit round robin style and just go up and down and let everybody ask you a question and possibly some follow-up questions or clarifying questions. And we expect it to last approximately like an hour to an hour and a half. Please let us know if you need anything. And also at the end, if you have anything you want to ask us about Trustful or our community or anything like that, please feel free to do that. Okay. All right. As the new superintendent of this school system, what would be your actions for the first month, the first few months, and the first 6 months of your time, and how would you gauge your success at the end of that?
Okay, very good. It's my understanding that this is a position that you would like for the superintendent to begin in April, based on the timeline. So there's really no time to really learn the position. So you got to hit the ground running. And yeah, my last superintendency, I did the same thing. I began a superintendency in April. So I'm familiar with coming in and having your end of the year activities scheduled and ready to go. You've got spring testing and that kind of thing. So, but it's going to be very important to get to know each of you, to get to know all the stakeholders. So as quickly as I can, meet with central office leadership teams, meet with you all, meet with each principal, meet with staffs at each school, get to know them, allow them to get to know me, meet with community members, establish those relationships, and make sure that we continue and we don't miss a beat. So that's a lot to do in 1 month, actually. So getting to all of those folks and getting those end of the year activities, making sure they are on schedule, ready to go. And the Alabama testing window, I'm sure it's similar to Georgia's. We're probably right in the thick of things right now. So just making sure all those activities get done and get done quickly and smoothly. Within the first 6 months, I like to have a lot of advisory committees. That is something that enables me to keep a pulse on things within the district and within the community. It's very important. When I took over the school district where I was, it was a situation a little bit similar to something that you guys have experienced here. But in this particular case, it was a serious ethical issue, and there was a tremendous loss of trust within the community with the school district. The superintendent and the principal, the assistant superintendent had all been terminated. They'd actually all been arrested. There was quite a bit of things to do. So the advisory committees are very important. It gives the community an opportunity to have input and to have a voice. And when, for example, the district that I came from, when you have had such a breach of trust, when parents send their children to your school, they expect them to be safe. And when things like what happened where I was happen, and they're not communicated with, and I'm talking about the district that I was in, it breaks that trust. And so those advisory committees are very important. So I had a parent advisory committee, I had a teacher advisory committee, I had a student advisory committee, and I had a superintendent advisory committee made up of community members. And so I would meet with all of them at least once or twice a year to get feedback, to go over even just to provide them updates on things that are going on, get input from them. What are your concerns? What can we do better? How can we improve? And also, I don't want to forget the advisory committee for staff members. It's important to talk with your bus drivers. It's important to talk with your non-certified folks, your janitors, your school nutrition folks. All those people have a role in the school system. So establishing those committees and meeting with them in the first 6 months, ensure all vacant staff positions are filled for the coming school year. That's critically important. Make sure summer activities that are scheduled are all the resources are in place and things that are necessary and needed for that are taken care of. If you all have not already been through the budget process for the coming fiscal year, there may be the need to schedule a board retreat to go over the budget, to develop the budget, that type of thing. I also want to make sure I review emergency plans at school districts and make sure that, or at the schools, to make sure all those are good to go. Audit and review departments and programs to make sure those things are up and running. That may not be a first 6 month thing, but maybe the first year, at least be able to look at what are we using and is it working? Is it effective? Is it getting the results that we need to get or that we're looking for? Analyze and disaggregate spring testing data when it comes back. Disaggregating data is extremely important. It is, and I think you guys hit on it, and we'll discuss it later in the interview when you start talking about achievement gaps. It's very misleading to say, maybe 95% of our students are meeting or exceeding, when you might have a specific subgroup of students who's performing significantly less than that. But when you aggregate them, it kind of masks that. And so if there was anything good that came out of No Child Left Behind, it was that disaggregation of data and drilling down and looking at those subgroups. That's going to be critically important in the spring to make sure that any adjustments that need to be made are planned for over the summer. If there are remediations that need to take place or accelerations that need to take place at summer school, that you have that data and you're armed with that, so you can make sure that you recover that loss of learning or actually accelerate the student learning to make sure they're on track and ready to go for the coming fall. How would I gauge my success? Hopefully there is a very solid strategic plan. If not, we'll go back and look at that and we'll review that. I imagine with the results that you all have, there is a very solid strategic plan because solid strategic plans get results, and that strategic plan becomes your guiding document. So looking at goals as they're laid out in the strategic plan and how we're doing at accomplishing those, that's one gauge of success. Again, looking at that sub data, looking at subgroups, looking at achievement gaps and where we are. You all conduct an evaluation of the superintendent. That would be a gauge of how we're making progress. Administrative review, I like to have principals and administrators review me and give me feedback on how things are going. And then just outside, do we have an increase in partnerships? Do we have an increase in community involvement? Do we have an increase in community trust, maybe as established by surveys and that type of thing? And then analyze and teacher recruitment data. Do we have a lot of teachers leaving? Do we have, what does that retention, teacher retention data look like? So those are several measures I think we could gauge success.
So in your advisory groups, do you do any kind of surveys with those groups, or is it just? a general survey? You know, you named several advisory
Mhm.
groups. Would you do anything to get their evaluation
Absolutely.
of this?
Absolutely. And many of those advisory committee members also as we get to the discussion about strategic planning, those people were also representative in our committees on our strategic planning. So yes, they were involved in surveys, getting feedback and that type of thing. Absolutely.
Thank you. That was a long question.
Sorry about that.
No.
Okay, so I would like to know moving into kind of the next category, I want to know about your leadership style. Like, what do you see as your role as a superintendent with the community, with us as a board? How do you communicate with the community? How do you communicate with us as a board? How do you communicate with with the staff administration, that sort of thing? Those are
Okay.
my broad questions.
So the kind of leadership role that I would expect any superintendent to have, first is visible. The superintendent has to be visible. If you're going to have trust and if you're going to have support and you're going to have buy-in from not only your staff, but your community, they have to see the superintendent. You know, when I go out to schools and I visit, I don't want it to always be an evaluation or something wrong has happened. I want to just go look. I want to go visit classrooms. I want to go see what children are doing. I love to read to children. I like to be involved and I like to, go have lunch with teachers, go have lunch with principals, attend the extracurricular activities, ball games. I think last week there was a curriculum night here at the high school, here at Trussville High School. The superintendent should be at things like that, just being aware, just being present and available. So visible, accessible. The superintendent needs to be accessible. People need to know that they can have access. My policy is an open door policy. I mean, naturally, there are times that I have to close the door and have meetings. However, my door is pretty much always open. If I'm in the office and I'm not in a school, I like to have that door open so people feel like they can come and access. And that leads to the next thing is that the leadership style needs to be approachable. That's something that I like to folks to know that they can talk to me. Just be real with folks, be honest with folks. That's very, very important. And be active in the community. Again, that builds trust in your community as well. My last superintendency, I was on the Chamber of Commerce board. I was on the Department of Public Health board. I worked with the Industrial Development Authority. I was on foundations, scholarship boards, all of those things. Those are roles that not only gives you an opportunity to be involved in the community at large, but it gives you multiple facets to get your school vision and mission and what's going on in your school system out to your community. And it gives you the opportunity to answer any questions and things like that that are out there. So visible, accessible, approachable, active in the community. My leadership style, I like for that to be very collaborative, working with stakeholders, developing effective strategies to help increase student success. And all of that, you got to listen. Listening is very, very important. Communication is two-way. You have to listen really before you start a lot of conversation. Before you really start talking and telling, you got to listen and hear what folks, where they're coming from and what their hearts are. So.
I guess just piggybacking off of that, as far as listening, like how do you foresee the lines of communication to being extended to the community or parents or to the board, us as a board? How does it practically? I'm trying to look for some practical things here.
As far as how folks could communicate,
Sure.
Well, again, having the open door policy, but engaging with technology, there are multiple ways that we can communicate. There's email, there's phone calls, there's text messaging. We developed, I know you guys have it too, we developed a school app so that we could communicate immediately with parents. So all of those avenues are very, very important, but returning phone calls when they come in a timely fashion, returning emails. If I'm busy, then I can still leave a message or a return email and say, I received your message, got, your voicemail, your email message. I will get back with you as soon as I can. Just letting folks know you've heard them. Otherwise, they feel ignored. That help?
Sure, sure.
So I want to go back to Ms. Brown's question about starting off. In the previous school system that you were superintendent of, and you described the challenges, was it a cold start or were you already in that system in a position? I was trying to look through the resume and the same time
No,
listen.
it was a cold start. I left from being state superintendent to go to that district.
Okay, and talk to me about that school district size. How many schools were in that district? And that's going to lead into my
3
question.
schools,
3 schools.
one,
That's
one elementary, one middle, one high.
okay. So then we talked about, to Kim's question about leadership style and being involved and being seen. So when you really contemplate that, you used the word trust, which I thought was interesting, a valuable commodity. How do you go about building that rapport and trust? And maybe you give me real world examples of how you did it in that cold start in that
Okay,
school
sure.
system.
And I hate to harp on certain things, but they work. The open door policy. You would not believe the number of parents who that was all they needed was access and for me to listen. So being available to those parents to listen to them. I walked in day one, the first day I was there into a special education remediation hearing. The district hadn't had a special ed director in 6 months. No special ed director, no school board attorney. I had, in addition to that, 3 civil rights complaints opened with the Office of Civil Rights. So there was a lot going on in that community, and there was a lot of things that needed to be done. So being accessible, being available to them, talking with them. I also met with district leaders. We would go to lunch, county commissioners, the owner of the local telephone company, those types of folks who are influencers in the community. I've made it a point to establish very strong relationships with the media, because everything that had been communicated to the community up to that point was negative news.
So let me put the second side of that. So we talked about the public. Now let's talk about the internal employees. So when you think about principals, administrators, how do you go about, or what's your belief system of responsibilities that are pushed out to them and holding accountability for that? Kind of what's your leadership style for that?
Sure. We had a pretty extensive evaluation system. That was one of the things that I did as state superintendent, was to completely redo the teacher and leader evaluation systems in the state. And so those are statewide. Every district has the same leader evaluation system and teacher evaluation system. Those systems are no longer based on, are you looking at specific teaching strategies? Did the teacher do this? Did the teacher do that? As much as they are looking at student learning, are students learning? So the learning is important. Every teacher and every principal had to establish a student achievement goal of their own as part of their evaluation system. They had to establish a professional learning goal as part of their evaluation system. So from a leadership perspective, I would sit down with all of my principals at the beginning of the school year and go over their evaluation. They had a voice in their evaluation by determining with me what is their professional learning goal and then what is their student achievement goal for their school. So we would have that initial meeting. We would sign off on all of that. We would have a meeting about the end of the first semester, mid-year, a progress monitoring situation. How are things going? Anything that you need? Where are you in the accomplishment of these professional learning goals? And then at the end of the year, we would have our end of the year evaluation, and we would come full circle and have an evaluation over those goals or whether they accomplished them. So the communication with them was important, but holding them accountable with that evaluation system is key.
Okay. It's just in closing that, you have no problem with 360 evaluations for the superintendent
No,
either?
no,
Okay.
not at all. Sometimes they're not comfortable,
Oh, yeah.
but that's how you grow. That's how you improve and get better.
Okay, we're gonna jump to another category, parents and community engagement. In your role as superintendent, how would you ensure all groups are fully engaged with schools?
Okay. Going back to the advisory committees, I make it a point to make sure all groups are represented on my advisory committees. So that's key to making sure their voices are on those advisory committees. The other thing is, not everybody I loved school. You know, I'm a first generation college graduate. I knew I wanted to go to college. I knew it was going to be on my own, so I did well in school. Not everybody has a positive school experience. And so oftentimes, a lot of those folks that become parents don't want to come back in your school because they don't have a positive memory, if that helps. So going where they are, instead of making them come to you, go where they are. So again, going to the activities, the ball games, those types of, all of that is important, making yourself available to them there. But we also did something fairly unique in the district that I was superintendent of, is we scheduled several meetings a year in different places in the community at local churches. And it was just an opportunity to go and talk with parents in their territory about what's going on at school, talking about the programs. Every principal would go, every principal spoke about what was going on at their school. We had refreshments. They had an opportunity to ask questions. So it was, the principals had handouts about things that are going on. So again, getting them involved, and sometimes it's going to them, getting them to your advisory committees and making sure they feel comfortable that their voice is heard.
Why is diversity important to you?
Diversity is important to me because there's strength in that diversity.
Mhm.
We are all different, but that difference is what makes us strong, is when we understand each other and we work together. Just having diversity is not necessarily strong, but being able to understand people's backgrounds and where they come from and their voice, and their the impact that they all have on our goal. We're all headed to the same place. Everybody needs a quality education. It doesn't matter who you are, where you come, none of that matters to me. What matters is that everybody has that opportunity. And so that diversity is incredibly important because everybody needs to feel like they're heard. Everybody has something to contribute to our overall mission and goal.
Were you intentional about diversity?
Absolutely. I will say this, in the tiny community where I was, my central office staff and really a lot, not just central office, principals, teachers, we had diversity across the board. Now, were there times where people were upset with me because I didn't hire a person that they wanted me to hire? Sure. But I'm going to hire the best person for the job. And if I have somebody, and I remember this case in particular, the resume was filled with errors. It was poorly written. The interview was poor. I'm not going to hire a person to teach children based on diversity alone. But diversity is important, but they have to be the best person for my students.
Switch gears a little bit. What are your expectations for student achievement? And how would you improve student achievement in our school system?
First and foremost, and I think you guys mentioned it in the application or in the questions, I expect all students to learn. All students can learn, and all students can learn, and that happens when we have high expectations. We have high expectations of all students. I'm going to give a couple of examples. I have a student, former student at Rome High School that, and I will even, give myself as an example. I have 4 older brothers. And let's just say there was a lot, we were very different I was a first-generation college graduate. If we don't have high expectations for all students, we may let prior knowledge of a family or a student or a person affect what expectations we have of a student. So I had teachers who didn't expect much of me except trouble. And so in this particular case of the other student at Rome High School, failed kindergarten, wasn't gonna, the information that was passed along, there were no high expectations held for that student. That student is now in a doctoral program at the University of Alabama and is a Alabama educator and has been for years, very successful. So high expectations of all students is critical. How do you do that? Again, part of that is teacher evaluation system, making sure that those teachers are accountable for student achievement in their classrooms, having them establish those goals, those student learning goals. And I like to insist that those goals be SMART goals. If you're familiar with the concept of a SMART goal, it's specific, it's measurable, it's attainable. We need to be realistic. Okay, that's the R, and timely. We have to understand that high achievement is not necessarily going to look the same for every student. Students that are very passionate about career and technical education may excel to a greater height in their career tech classes than they do in another class. Doesn't mean they're not excelling here or that you don't have high expectations of them, but students have different passions and things. One of the, as state superintendent, I had the opportunity to visit a lot of different schools, to visit other countries, research educational systems in other countries. One of the best schools that I ever visited in the United States was the Walton Rural Education Center in Walton, Kansas. That school, if you guys remember back, No Child Left Behind, school had never made AYP. It was an elementary school. They were facing state takeover. Teachers were frustrated because they knew they were teaching these concepts that they were being tested on, and the students weren't passing the tests. One of the examples that they used was one of the standards of mathematics in one of the elementary grades. I don't remember if it's third grade or fourth grade, was units of measurement. And so the question, and they taught the units of measurement, but the question on the state exam dealt with, it was a question about what is the appropriate unit of measurement for a field that measures, whatever the measurements were. But the students have a piece of paper. They have a rectangle drawn on a piece of paper and they're using a ruler. So what they realized is the students were getting it wrong because the ruler has inches and centimeters and things like that. So when they shifted how they taught, every child in that school was connected in some way to agriculture. When they shifted how they taught that standard and they took the student outside to see a field that measured that, they understood that the appropriate unit of measurement was an acre and not an inch or a square foot or something of that nature. So they introduced a project-based learning where every grade had a project. And in 2 years, the school went from never making AYP to 96 or 98% of their students passing in reading, the state standards, and 100% passing in mathematics, and they became a national model. So those high expectations came from making learning relevant to students, engaging them with hands-on activities, not just sitting at a desk with a book. Sitting at a desk, yes, that's important. Instruction, verbal instruction is important, but hands-on problem solving, students seeing how they use what they're learning to solve problems makes that learning concrete. And that's how you can get high expectations.
Follow up on that a little bit. Trustful is right now, from an academic standpoint, very strong. I'm not sure if you had an opportunity to look at that or not.
Yes,
So
I have.
what are your thoughts on maintaining that and being able to, the gap between where we are now and the top is very little. So what do you do to keep moving on, moving toward that?
Well, obviously, a lot of what you're doing right now is working because you are successful and you are where you are. When you are approaching towards the top, and again, let's go back to the conversation earlier about achievement gaps and subgroups. Looking at your data, there are some achievement gaps in the data. specifically with African-American student subgroup, limited English proficient subgroup, low income, 2 or more races. And they may not be huge achievement gaps, but when you're already performing at the top, you've got to find where your weaknesses are. If you want to keep moving forward, that's the way you keep moving forward. A shotgun approach is not going to work. And I'll give you an example from when I was a curriculum director. Looking at data and looking at test scores when they came in from spring testing, my supposedly highest performing middle school had some low scores. And when we started disaggregating the data, it came down to one teacher's classroom. Now that could be a teacher issue. It could be a student issue, but a shotgun approach to say, okay, we're all going to do this differently because we didn't do well. It kills morale because you've got 4 or 5 teachers that had great results. And so disaggregating that data and getting down and drilling down to those subgroups is incredibly important. Get down to the individual students, these standards that they're not performing well on. I don't know about this, the ACAP, if they get information back to districts like they might in Georgia, where specific questions are aligned to specific standards. But if you're doing progress monitoring during the course of the year, and you're using formative assessments in preparation for that end of the year summative assessment, then you may know what standards students are not performing well on. And so that's very, very important, is that to use that data and drill down and you know specifically which students are not performing well, and you target those students with the resources that they need, whether it's additional resources, whether it's remediation, whether it's acceleration, whether it's more time, whether it's different instructional strategies. That's how you continue to get improvement.
Data driven, or how do you balance between data driven and really working with students, and how do you blend these things together?
Well, data is incredibly important because that's how the federal government's going to hold us accountable. How the state government's going to hold us accountable. That's the message that's going to be communicated to your community is data. And so that data is incredibly important, and that data is going to tell you where children are. What data doesn't give you is the human side. You have to have relationships with students. And I hope you don't mind me using examples. When I was a high school English teacher, I had a young lady that had diagnosed learning disability in written expression. I'm teaching English. We have novels that we read. We have expectations of book reports. That relationship and understanding her needs, I knew that she was an artist and I knew she liked to draw. And so she would still write for me, but that was not the only way that I held her accountable. We still worked on her written expression, but I allowed her to draw, and I allowed her to do multiple drawings, paintings, whatever. And then she would give an oral book report using her drawings. So that gave me an idea of, she really understands this story, as opposed to just measuring on the way she writes, because she has a specific learning disability there. So the relationship piece, you can't throw that out. You can't be solely dedicated to data, but the relationship piece is how you're going to move the needle with the kid, with the student, because if they don't know that you care about them, they may not really care what different strategies you're using.
Thank you.
So if we're trying to bridge the student achievement gap, I'm worried about our educators. We know over the last couple of years, it's been tough.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if that's our goal, and what steps would you take to create a culture among educators for high expectations and a culture of higher learning? High expectations and a culture of learning with our educators.
Sure. I'm going to read something if you don't mind.
Sure.
Because it's a list, because it gets to your point of expectations of teachers and wanting to be careful about how we pursue, and we don't want to burn teachers out. So
Right.
America's public education started in America in the 1640s. And they were designed to teach children basic reading, writing, math, the values of a democratic society. Curriculum pretty much remained unchanged for a couple hundred years. Beginning in the 20th century, America's leaders saw public schools as the logical place to assimilate immigrants and select and sort young people into thinkers and doers and, the Industrial Revolution. So school systems began to take on other responsibilities. I will not bore you with the list of over 75 things that were added to teachers' expectations up until the 21st century. I'm going to start just at the 21st century with a list of things that we have added to teachers that we expect of them. So the accountability with No Child Left Behind and ESSA, internet safety, bullying prevention programs, texting and social media safety, body mass index evaluation. I don't know if you guys do that here in Alabama. We do it in Georgia. It's a state law. Eating disorder counseling, suicide awareness programs, steroid abuse prevention programs, media literacy training, financial literacy development, intruder lockdown training, health and wellness programs, PBIS, progress monitoring, multi-tiered systems of support or RTI, leadership training, contextual learning and skill development, credit recovery programs, online learning requirements, STEM programs, social emotional learning, trauma-informed learning, whole child learning, and then COVID-19 remote learning. That's just what we've added to their list of expectations, in addition to expecting them to teach reading, writing, math. That's not a complete list either. And that's not to say those things are not important. I say it to say we have to take all of that into consideration. And what can we do to make teachers' lives easier, more accommodating, understanding what they're having to do in addition to teaching what they've been trained to teach. So, and how we will do that. My leadership team will make sure teachers feel welcomed and appreciated. Sometimes that costs money, sometimes that doesn't. Sometimes that's being there and just having communication with them, listening to them, making sure their facilities are adequately equipped, maintained, and clean so that they feel safe. I think you guys have done a phenomenal job. I followed the news with the landfill fire and the air quality and the monitoring. You guys were right on top of that. That's important to teachers. We will ensure that teachers have what they need to be successful: supplies, curriculum resources, technology. Ensure that building level leaders are the best that we can find, that they are in a position to support their teachers. Not everything for keeping morale high costs money. It can be simple things like, do they have somebody that they can go to if they're struggling? Do we have a mentoring program? Do we have a coaching program? Do we have somebody that they can go to that they can get some help? Ensure they know what to do if there's an emergency. That's sometimes teachers don't know. And that makes them feel uneasy. That makes them not feel safe in their environment. Ensure that someone checks on teachers during the course of the day, whether it's an administrator, a friend, a mentor, or whatever. Just make sure teachers know that they're cared for. Again, ensure that the building's in good repair, air quality, HVAC works, lights all work, it's clean. Ensure that principals, when they're doing their evaluations, are providing timely feedback and meaningful feedback. Teachers want to know when you go and you evaluate them, they want to know more than, is it satisfactory? They want to know meaningful feedback. How can I improve? What did you like? What did you not like? Ensure that teachers themselves are involved in developing specific ways to improve their climate. Support them in discipline. That is a major factor, that teachers feel supported when it comes to school discipline. And another one that I encountered regularly is professional learning. Teachers, it drives them crazy to be assigned a professional learning activity that is not really related to their interest or their needs. And so targeted professional learning that helps them improve is very helpful. So those are a number of things that you can do to help keep morale up, balance high expectations, balance the fact, and recognize we've got achievement gaps we're working on, but we're going to make sure you have everything that you need.
Let me just follow up with this. So there's a severe teaching shortage. So what would be your plan for recruiting just top-notch teachers to Trussell City Schools?
one piece you already have in place, and that is you're a successful district. You're a high performing district. Success attracts success. That's important. So to keep moving that needle and keep being successful is important. I think it's important to have relationships with your post-secondary programs, those education schools, whether it's Jacksonville State, Alabama, Auburn, have a relationship with them, be able to participate in recruitment fairs. That's something that was that I tried to do because I could oftentimes get in sooner if I had those relationships and know who's about to graduate. Being a place where those people can send student teachers. That way you get an eye on, whether a teacher that's about to graduate is top notch, whether they are knocking it out of the park, or whether, that's somebody that you want to pass on. That the student teacher piece is very important to helping you as an administrator, as a superintendent also know, recruit those folks. So doing recruitment fairs, that works. But the success piece and having that positive PR, having a great community for them to live in, Trustful offers so much for young people. So there's a lot here, and it's just leveraging and making sure that you're able to use that to recruit those folks.
Thank you.
Why Trustful? I mean, and what I mean by that is, you're obviously from Georgia, and we're
Yes.
here in Alabama. Why Trustful? I'm sure you have looked about us and learned about us and read about us and know a lot about us. So I'm curious, why here, and what could you offer us? What can you bring us for strategic planning or for advisory committees, and what does that look like?
I'm sure you guys know how unique you are. Well, I don't know in Alabama in Georgia, every school board is elected. You don't have appointed school boards. You have elected school boards, you have appointed superintendents. It's a model and it works, but it's hard to get politics out of education when you have folks who are elected. And in your case, you have an appointed school board, and you have an appointed superintendent. That helps. It doesn't remove all the politics. Politics is in everything. Politics is in church. But that is an environment that you've got a great history, you've got a great district, and you guys have a great relationship, from what I can tell, with your superintendents. So that's of interest. I about came out of my skin when I read the Trustful 2040 plan. And what is in the 2040 plan as far as the vision for education. And your guys' vision, am I barking up a wrong tree here? Are you guys familiar with that? Okay. But the education corridor and what you guys are envisioning for early college, for career and technical education, that's exciting. That is very similar to the College and Career Academy concept that Georgia has. That really took off during my tenure as state superintendent. I actually developed Georgia's career pathway system. We developed over 100 career pathways in 17 clusters. I know that Hewitt Trustful has, from what I've read, 7 career pathways. There are 16 clusters in the National Career Cluster model. In Georgia, we added the 17th cluster. We used the 16, but we added energy as a career cluster. And so we developed over 100 different pathways across 17 career clusters. We worked with our technical college system. We worked with business and industry. That's, again, the relevancy piece for students. We can do a much better job. I've always said that college is the most expensive career development program there is. Nobody wants to send a child to school and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars in tuition, or have student loans, student debt, and you graduate and you don't know what you're going to do, or you have a degree in something that there's no job growth in. So we can do a much better job helping children find their passions. What are they interested in, and design an opportunity for them to be successful. That was the impetus of career pathways. So, and in Georgia, I designed that to be a flexible system. so that every school district could design their own pathway based on the economic needs in their community. That pathway and the courses have to be approved by the state board, and there's a process for that to happen. You can't just go, renegade and do your own thing. There is a process in place for that to happen. So in my last school district, I was in our district was basically a 50-50 black-white school district. My graduation rate of my African-American students was 98%, and my graduation rate of my white students was 68%. And data couldn't find out for me what was going on with these students. But ultimately what we determined was we were on the Georgia coast. The largest industry in our district was shrimping. A lot of the students who were dropping out, not finishing, their families owned the shrimp boats. They were going to work. They were dropping out and they were going out to the water. That was exciting. So you know what we did? We created our own career pathway in commercial fishing. The only school on the East Coast that has a career pathway at high school for commercial fishing. We worked with the shrimping industry. We worked with the University of Georgia. We worked with the Coastal Pines Technical College System of Georgia. So students were able to stay in school, take courses that earned them college credit in high school, led to a certificate, a credential that the shrimping industry was excited about, because they now were receiving students or young people who were better qualified, more safety conscious. They had their credential. They could then go on to the technical college and receive their second credential in a year. So there's so much here. That education corridor excites me. The working with business and industry, working with your post-secondary system to establish opportunities for students. Nothing gets me fired up more than seeing a child passionate about something that they're doing. I'll give you another example. I know but I was out visiting a school as state superintendent in Peach County, Georgia, rural Georgia. And I walk into the automotive technology class, and the teacher tells me they're getting ready to go to the Skills USA competition, and the students are going to demonstrate for me the competition that they were in, which was they had a Chevrolet 350 V8 motor on a mount, and they were going to disassemble the motor and put it back together. I'm like, I'm sorry, I really don't have that kind of time. And before I could get it out, he had them off. And to see those students, it wasn't about just taking an engine apart. To see their communication, to see their teamwork, to see the leadership of the young people, they had that engine taken apart and put back together in 8 minutes. And they loved what they were doing. They were learning physics, because they were talking about, the teachers giving them, basically instructions about torque and all this kind of. And they're having to do all that. And it was absolutely phenomenal. I was so impressed. I brought them to the state capitol. Let them demonstrate for our senators and our House of Representative members, and push for more funding for dual enrollment and for activities like this, because it was making a difference in those kids' lives. So why Trustful? You guys have got a lot of great stuff going on, and you've got a vision that I would love to be a part of.
That's a good question. I'm thinking about your experiences. We've heard you talk about English teacher, superintendent, state superintendent. I'm sure there's probably some principal roles in there as well.
Yes.
Which role, or what experience in which role defines you the most and kind of makes you who you are today as an educator?
It's tough, because they all have their own contributions as to who I am. The high school principal was probably one of the most enjoyable jobs, but it was the most time consuming, because you have all those activities. If you do it right, you've got all those activities that you're going to, and you're involved with those students, and it takes a lot of time. The state superintendent, I really enjoyed that work. That was probably passion-wise, because I was involved in the policy side. I was involved in helping the state establish a framework of learning that would impact students across the state, not just students in my school if I'm a principal, not just students in my district if I'm a superintendent. So I had the opportunity, I was on the board of directors of the Council of Chief State School Officers. So I had the opportunity on numerous occasions to have influence on the national level with U.S. Department of Education and policy, national policy. So that part was extremely rewarding. The politics side of it, not so much, but you have to deal with that. The local superintendency is so much different. And so there was to say that this was more than this really, state superintendent really doesn't even prepare you to be a local superintendent. I mean, they're just very different. You know, when you're a local superintendent, this is how I've described it to some folks. When I was state superintendent, if I had an open records request come in, it went down to legal. You know, if I had something come in, it went down to finance, it went down to the attorneys. You know, you had staff, you had resources. When I was a local superintendent, I was the staff. You know, so when an open records request came in, guess who got it? You know, when the media calls, it doesn't go to your communication team. You know, you don't have a communications person because you don't have a budget for it. So there are certainly different things. You know, as a local superintendent, I didn't understand the real impact. I knew the funding issues were different. I knew that there were, we call it two different Georgias. There's Atlanta and the rest of Georgia. South Georgia, you know, and that's where I went as a local superintendent. I really saw that they didn't get the news. Their news comes out of Jacksonville, Florida. Yeah, so they didn't oftentimes hear what was going on. And so it really opened my eyes to, oh my gosh, things really are different. So there's value in all of them. But I would probably say the state superintendent and the local superintendent together were probably the most impactful.
Well, you can see, I mean, you get excited about aspects of all of it, especially the state thing, because you can make a difference on a large scale. When you come to that local superintendent role, you think about all the challenges of managing finances, of strategic planning, of special education, of teacher development, teacher retention, recruitment. If you were getting out of bed today to head to work, what job responsibility would just excite you the most?
I didn't hear the very first part of the question.
If you were just heading to work today, what responsibility in that superintendent's job would just have you so fired up that that's the one you're getting to do today? And I'm aware we're off script, but that makes it better.
I would say the policy side and curriculum.
Curriculum. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so one of the things that you said earlier, you like to have an open door policy.
Yes.
So what is your plan? What is your plan in boosting morale and keeping the employees engaged and excited about you being our new leader and also making sure that we continue to achieve our goals?
Well, I think to revisit some of the things I've said in different questions, teachers want to know that you care. They want to know that you are listening to them, visiting them in their classrooms, not to evaluate them, but just to see them, to listen to them. You know, I've listened to teachers that, you know, as they cry about different things. That's important, you know, to be able to be a real human and to be a support. You can't do that if the only time they see you is if you're evaluating them or if you're calling them into the principal's office to chastise them, to, you know, discipline them for something. So being visible with them, being involved in the things that they're involved with, making sure that they have opportunities to grow, making sure that they have professional learning activities that they care about, you know, that they want to do, making sure that they're involved in the vision for the district, the plan for the district, the strategic plan, making sure they're involved with that, making sure their voice is heard, making sure that you have supplied. As superintendent, my job is to make sure that the environment is conducive to those high expectations. The environment is conducive to learning. again, I'll give an example. My previous school district, I couldn't get my finger on why the buildings weren't clean. And I was getting ready for open house, my first open house, and I'm touring the facilities, make sure they're in good shape. And I can smell the bathrooms before I even get to them in one of the schools. And I go in and, the facilities are in horrible shape. I'm like, what are our folks doing? That has an impact on teachers when they're in that environment every day. I had, so the infrastructure of our school district was in difficult shape. So it turns out that previous leaders had seen the school district as a employment agency. And there were a lot of folks working within these roles and had these responsibilities that just weren't doing their job. But as the new superintendent from the outside in a very small community, that's a pretty tough thing. So what we did with the board's approval, it saved us money in our budget, is we worked with a company, we contracted with a company to take over our custodial services and an outside agency, but they assumed all of our employees. Nobody lost a job. That was part of our vision and how it worked. So everybody kept their job, but then if things did not go well with this agency, they were the ones that were letting folks go, and they were, so overnight our buildings became clean. And basically, it was not great when I got there, but that was an avenue that we took that made a difference for teachers, is they didn't have to smell the bathrooms as they walked down the hall. Addressing heating and air conditioning issues. Making sure that we had air conditionings up in South Georgia. If you don't have air conditioning, it's tough. So making sure those facilities are clean and they're ready, making sure they have the resources that they need to teach, making sure they have the technology that they need to teach, making sure that it works. So all of those things are very important to keeping morale up.
Thank you.
Let's talk a little bit more about strategic plan. How would you go about developing a strategic plan, or working with, who would you include in your strategic plan? What stakeholders, what groups would you include, and how would you go about that? Of course, the board's going to be involved, quite obviously, but tell us a little bit more about your whole concept of this.
Well, I did actually go through the strategic planning process with my previous school district. Now we'll walk you through what the process that we used. It depends on what you want, what the outcome is that you want. For me, I wanted a document that was going to be solid, that was supported by the community, that was supported by the school district, that was supported by teachers and staff and the board. And that was going to guide us and lead us and be the document that basically laid out where our direction for the next 5 years. Because then as you go through the budgeting process, you can talk about, well, how does this align with our strategic plan? How does this help us accomplish our strategic plan? So what I did was I contracted with the Georgia School Boards Association. They have staff that is, that's what they do. They work with school boards to develop strategic plans. I was a very small school district. I didn't have the capacity in my central office to do everything that's involved in putting together a comprehensive strategic plan. So GSBA helped us do that. They worked with me and my staff to put together the committees. Who do I want on it? I want teachers on it. I want students on it. I want board members on it. I want community members on it. I want leaders on it. I wanted every stakeholder represented in our community to have an opportunity to be on a committee that work on that strategic plan. The process that we went through, they solicited feedback through surveys, the online surveys. That is so time consuming in and of itself, to send emails out, get surveys back, get that data in, disaggregate that data, write it up into charts and lists to go back and then meet with those committees. They did all that work for us. And then we would bring the committees together. We would host the evening meetings. They would go over, GSBA would come and report out on, this is what the survey data says, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So having the opportunity for the community to be a part, every stakeholder be a part is very important. They would then take all of the information back. They would sit down with the board, my leadership team and me. We would discuss the community's input. We would discuss goals, objectives, and things of that nature. They then took it all back, produced a strategic plan, came back again to have another, let's say, a vetting session with the board and the leadership team. Are we on the right track? Is this how you like it? What changes do we need to make? We also then sent that report back out to all the different committee members through an email to let them have input on that draft version of the plan until a final document was produced. So we worked with that outside organization, the Georgia School Board Association, to help us accomplish that. There are a number of folks that do it. It was economical for us to use GSBA because we were not a wealthy school district.
Thank you.
Let me ask you this. You brought it up earlier about policies and procedures. If you were coming into our school district and, new superintendent, what is your feeling or how would you approach policies and procedures, overhaul? I mean, as the new superintendent, just curious to how that would.
Well, as I said, this is a high-performing school district already. Things are working well. Maybe not everything. I don't know where, I don't know all the.
Right.
So not necessarily coming in with saying, we're going to change everything. We're going to do a complete overhaul. What I did in my previous school district was read through the policy manual and look at when it was last updated. Was it relevant? Had state policies, rules, laws changed? Were the policies even relevant anymore? Were they violating law because they hadn't been updated? So it's important to read through that policy manual and make sure that things are updated, they're current. Sit down and talk with you all and see what you want. Are you guys comfortable with the policy manual, or are there things that you want to see changed? I don't think coming in and doing a whole scale policy change is something that you need to do in a high performing school district. I think being very targeted in what you do and looking to make sure everything is current and relevant, and then talking with you all and seeing, is there something specific that we need to address?
Okay. Does anybody have any other questions?
You're gonna do the two.
Yeah, but I wanted to make sure no one had another question. We're going to let Dr. Barge speak, just kind of free speak, but if anybody, I didn't want to cut anybody off from another question.
All right, talk to us about security. Talk to us about the role of the SROs, the police, the fire. What your thoughts are on increasing security, what your thoughts are on turning schools into fortified buildings, or are we a welcoming school system? Tell us a little bit about that. What's your thoughts?
Again, there are a lot of different routes that you can go with that, but I go back to when parents send their children to school, they want to feel comfortable that they're safe. So I think having SROs is extremely important. In my previous district, we were small, but we had our own police department. So they had arrest powers, and and they reported directly to the board, and that was the way they had it, and that's the way I worked with it. But we did make sure that when I arrived, they had one. But we made sure that by the time I left, we had one for each school. That was important. Having those folks on campus and visible is extremely, I think it's necessary in today's society for folks who may feel like, they have plans to do harm to a school. There's somebody there, and it's not going to be easy. We've done things in Georgia with secured entrances, vestibules, and things like that, the state sent money out for school districts to secure their front offices, to be able to keep parents from being able to, or anybody, not parents, but to keep intruders from being able to have free access into the hallways. They have to go through the office. They have to check in. Having technology available where they have to check in is important. one of the things that we did in my district, and this was something that the board was interested in doing, and this can go different ways and people have different thoughts about it. But ultimately, I think that there are extreme benefits for it. And that is we installed cameras in teachers' classrooms throughout the building, not just classrooms. So we had cameras throughout the building. Because we had issues and our teachers were not up in arms about it. They were on board because we had issues where students were accusing teachers of things that weren't happening. And so, having a camera in the classroom was helpful and protective for the teacher. It also was helpful for when teachers were out. They could do their lesson on their camera and then play the lesson back for the students when they were out with the substitute there. That was helpful. We did as a board put together a very robust policy that was very prescriptive about who had access to the video. But then also, so in other words, principal can't just go and pull a video to see what a teacher's doing. There was a sign-off process. There had to be a request. It had to be specific. It had to go, if it was, let's say a teacher, it had to go to the principal. The principal had to send it to the superintendent or to the superintendent's designee. If it was the principal that was wanting it, it had to go to the central office to the superintendent. There had to be a valid reason to pull a video. And there were only certain folks who could watch it. The policy was very prescriptive. And that made our teachers feel secure as well, that it wasn't being used as a got you kind of thing, but it truly was being used to protect them. And then working with law enforcement to make sure that they could have access to our system if it was needed in event that you had an intruder in the building, that they could access it, making sure they have keys to your building, that they can access it in need. So all of the things are very important to making sure that we keep students safe, we keep teachers safe. You've got to have the lockdown procedures in place. You've got to practice those. We did it. It's important that students know what to be able to do if heaven forbid that time comes.
Yeah, thank you.
I meant to do this at the first, but next couple of minutes, anything you want to tell us, personal, work, education wise, and then if you have any questions for us.
I want you guys to know, getting back to your question, why Trustful? I probably have never been more excited about interviewing for a position in my life. This is an awesome system. What you guys have the potential to accomplish here is incredible. And I would love to be a part of that. I think that my background in career and technical education as the state director of career and technical education before I was state superintendent, my experience as state superintendent with working with post-secondary education partners, business and industry partners, developing career pathways, I think that I have a lot to offer. Trustful as you move forward with the 2040 plan and the potential education corridor and I've been through facilities and building schools, built another situation in the school district that I took over. They had a replacement elementary school that there were some shenanigans that happened at the beginning with the bid process. And when I came in, it had been put on hold. It had been pulled back. They had lost money to the person that it had been given to. The contract had been given to. I had to go back through the whole bidding process, start all over, but still open that school on time and under budget. So I have got a lot of experience in dealing with facilities and looking at the way things are growing in Trustful, especially at your high school. I think from what I saw from 2021 to 2022, the high school grew about 290 students. That's huge. You've got to be ready to do something to make sure that you're not sitting with a bunch of trailers. Students, I mean, if you have to do that, it's not ideal. But having that vision, planning, and having the background to move forward with that is important. So I'm just honored to be here. Thank you for the opportunity and would love to be a part.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'd like you to know, we are interviewing 4 other candidates this week and we will be checking references and we'll be in touch. So we appreciate you coming here and applying for this position.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.